Hi. Hi, Brooklyn.
What's up? What's up, Joe? How you
How you
feeling?
doing? Well, that was a cup filler. Let me tell you that for these first 2 conversations, this big scary save act can be intimidating, but these first 2 conversations have really made me feel inspired, like
Yeah, yeah.
uplifted that we've got
That
this.
that was a very lovely interview. I enjoyed that immensely.
Well,
Yeah,
thank you very much. I'm going to introduce your guest with you, and then I'm going to pass it off and let you take the stage.
let's do it.
Yeah, let's bring in Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen. Welcome,
There he
Senator.
is.
And with that, I'll see you in a minute.
Ladies and gentlemen, with us today is Senator Chris Van Hollen joining us now as Republicans are pushing the SAVE Act, a bill that they claim is about election integrity, but critics say could make it harder for millions of Americans to vote. Senator, thank you for joining us.
Well, it's great to be with you, and thanks for shining a spotlight on all this.
Indeed. I mean, I can't believe that we are actually still having this debate because it's clear as day to me, like I wish somebody had framed the question on those polls clearly, because it feels like when I see polls, when I see Fox News brandishing polls, look, Democrats are 80% in favor of this. But wait a minute. Did you ask them, are Democrats in favor of having to go through a lot of rigmarole to get ID? Now, can you tell me in plain English, what does this bill actually do?
I can. And what this bill does is make it a lot harder for American citizens to vote, not by requiring any ID or proof, but by requiring specific kinds of ID that many Americans currently don't have, and that it will cost them money and a whole lot of time and effort to go out to exercise their right to vote. We don't have a poll tax in America, right? You're not supposed to have to pay for the right to vote. Every citizen has that right. And what they're doing is requiring, for example, either a passport, and only 50% of Americans have a passport, or a birth certificate. And a lot of people don't have their original birth certificate. And of course, as you've talked about, you have women who, when they get married, those who change their name, makes it much harder. So all of those people all of a sudden are not going to be able to register to vote. They're going to have to go to some state official and somehow, persuade them, hey, I really am an American citizen. It's really outrageous what they're doing.
Yeah.
And it's going to cost them. And it was interesting. Senator Lisa Murkowski, a Republican who's opposed to this, was talking about how her in state of Alaska, people are going to have to get on an airplane, pay $1,000 to go to their local register, right? I mean, the goal is to make it harder for tens of millions of Americans, citizens, to vote. That's their ultimate goal. They want to pick their voters, and they want to pick their voters so that they can try to rig the 2026 elections. That's what this is all about.
So this isn't really about showing ID at the polls. It's more about preventing or making it difficult just for people to get on the rolls. Is that it?
Well, that's right. So, for example, I said to Republicans, look, if the federal government wants to guarantee that every American citizen gets a voter ID and they get it for free, because nobody should have to pay for the right to vote,
Thank you.
do that.
Yes.
Do that. But
Yeah.
as soon as you tell them we should do that, they don't support that, because this is all based on this fraud, right? I mean, the fraud is that we have all these people who are here illegally, who are going out and casting votes. When you ask Republicans for the proof of that, they don't have it. They just don't have it. In fact, very conservative organizations like the Heritage Foundation, the Cato Institute, they've looked at long periods of time, like 20 years, and they found, in the case of the Heritage Foundation, like 13 cases of people where maybe wrongfully registered, and they're criminal penalties, right? I mean, think about this, right? If you're not here legally, the last thing you want to do
Yeah.
is for someone to find out you're here and put you in jail.
Hmm.
You could be up in jail up to 6 years for misrepresenting facts in a voter register. It just doesn't happen. It's like infinitesimal. But they're
It,
using this fraudulent story to try to do what we're saying, to put
it,
up these hurdles so that tens of millions of people will have a harder time to vote. And they think those people that they're targeting are likely to vote against them in 2026.
I
That's what
think
this is all about.
I think your argument against your argument explaining why undocumented immigrants would not, try to expose themselves to risk. It kind of reminds me of like when I was a kid. Used to go to Yankee Stadium, and we'd get the super duper cheap seats because who could afford anything else? And but we'd always try to sneak, sneak down to the good seats. Now, once you get to, if you actually successful in making it to the good seats, you don't want to show your face to security. You don't want to blow your seat, because you blow your seat, you're out of there. You're out of the stadium entirely. So, I is that an accurate analogy to the scenario that you presented?
Yeah, well, like, yeah, I mean, you don't, if you've got your good seat in this case, you obviously don't want to expose yourself and get risk getting booted out. Now, if you're not here legally, the last thing you want to do is show up at a polling place and risk not only getting deported, but also their criminal penalties. I mean, as I said, up to 5 years if you misrepresent facts when you register under
Hmm.
federal law, another up to a year in prison if you actually go ahead and vote. This is why people don't do that.
Yeah.
And Donald Trump kind of gave up the game when he said, and it wasn't that long ago, that we the Republicans need to do this to, quote, guarantee the 2026 midterm elections. That's his word, guarantee. And it's because they assess that by putting up these barriers, people who are mad that the Trump administration broke their promises, or for whatever reason, are would otherwise come out and vote them out of office, or Republicans out of office. And so they want to make it harder for
Hmm.
them to go vote. Kristi Noem said the same thing. You probably heard this, right? It was before she got booted. Thank God. Good riddance to Kristi Noem, former Secretary
Yes,
of Homeland Security. But she
indeed.
was in Arizona a couple weeks back, and she was asked about the SAVE Act. She was promoting it. She said, "Well, we want the right voters to come vote, and we want them to vote for the right leaders."
Yeah.
Okay, this is what it's all about. It's about rigging the elections. They did redistricting in Texas. They're trying every trick in the book to try to rig the 2026 election. They're doing it under the guise of election protection and election integrity. It's all a fraud.
Yeah. Um, so let me just piggyback on what you just said about what Donald Trump said about winning the midterms, because he also said that passing this kind of legislation would mean that Republicans never lose a race for 50 years. Now, do you take that as a joke or as a warning?
Oh, I take that as what Donald Trump is thinking, and it tells you exactly what his intentions are. I will say in the process, he's going to also hurt a lot of voters who may have voted for him, because he's going to make it a lot harder for them to get out and cast votes. But he doesn't give a damn, because his ultimately assessment is that on balance, he's going to make it harder for more people who would vote against him and Republicans to
Hmm.
come out to vote. But he's going to hurt a lot of people in the process, deprive them of their right to vote. But no, you're exactly right. What's in his mind is that this will essentially guarantee that he and Republicans win, because they're picking the voters that they want to be able to come out and vote, rather than having the voters be able to pick the people
Now,
they want for Congress or Senate or the White House.
now you said that this legislation would hurt his his own constituents, and that in fact is something that I saw I've seen in several other places that there's a higher percentage of people in red states, Republican voters in red states, that that do not currently have access to passport or birth certificate. So, what the hell is he thinking? Is this like a calculated gambit? Is he thinking that, well, sure, we'll lose a bunch of our own voters, but they're going to lose more of their own voters? What's in your opinion, what's the logic behind this move that seems like he's shooting himself in the foot?
Yeah, I think there are a couple things going on. One is, first, there is no doubt that he's going to hurt a lot of his own voters, right? I mean, he's going to make it so that they've got to go through all these hoops, pay some money, who knows what, to exercise their right to vote when you shouldn't have to do that as an American citizen. I think the other thing he's doing, though, here is he realizes that, the chances of this passing are pretty small, and we are going to defeat this.
Okay.
And he wants to then be able to say after the midterms, when, let's say, Democrats win back the House, that was all a fraud, that the Democrats cheated. We didn't pass the SAVE Act. It's all part of his ongoing effort to discredit elections when he loses, right? I mean, this is all, we're going through this because this man made up this story about how he really won the 2020 election, right? This is what he's thinking. This is the guy that got on the phone, as to Fulton County, Georgia, said, "Find me, what was it, 6,000, whatever, 11,000 votes." I can't remember.
11,780 votes.
So this is the man who actually thinks he lost the 2020 election because all these people who were here illegally came out and voted against him, which is just total BS, right?
Yep.
But that is his narrative. And what's outrageous, he's got all these Republican senators. They know that this isn't reality, but they're just going along with the dear leader because they're afraid if they don't go along with dear leader, he'll come after them and run someone against them in their primary. So we shouldn't, the country should not be put through this, but here we are. And I'm really glad you're getting the word out here, because a lot of people are fooled, because this is why my response to, well, all we're asking for is ID, is okay. Let's have the federal government today make sure you and me and everybody who's a citizen gets an ID, but don't put the burden on every citizen to have to pay more money and get certain kinds of ID that are not that easy to get. Like, passport, I have one, you have one, but a lot of people don't have passports.
I think, when I think when they ask the question in those polls that get, circulated and brandished, most respondents probably think, when they say, "Are you in favor of voter ID?" They're thinking, "Yeah, I got a driver's license. Sure. I have a picture ID. No problem. Military ID wouldn't be any good either.
Yeah.
College identification, no good." So they are being very disingenuous with their oh, well, you need an ID to buy a beer, you need ID to buy cigarettes. How do we cut through the BS on this
Well, I think
argument?
I think two ways. One is we need to get out the word like you're doing, because I think when people hear the facts, they're like, "Oh my God." I mean, the Trump folks are really trying to play us all for fools, right?
Yeah.
Because, as you say, our whole argument is, yeah, I just get my driver's license. Well, people need to know your driver's license won't cut it under the Republican bill for your ID for registration. And I do think it's effective to quote, Trump's, in his own words, like, how can it be that he thinks that this will guarantee Republican victory in November? Well, the only way you can try to guarantee victory is if you're trying to rig the election.
Thank you.
Right. And so and Christy Noem's, again, we talked about what she said, same thing. But I do think to call their bluff, and this is what I've said to Republicans. Okay, as I said, you make sure that today, I mean, let's just do a thought experiment. If today every American citizen got a voter ID, just
Mm-hmm.
boom, it appeared right here
Yeah,
for free, as it should be, because you don't have to pay to vote.
that's
Okay,
right.
but they're not doing that. They're
No.
not saying the federal government will make sure every American citizen will have an ID and be able to exercise their right to vote. They're saying you and me and that person in Alaska that Senator Murkowski is talking about, who's 1,000 miles away from the voter registration office, that they got to pay $1,000, get on a plane, and go prove to some state official that even though they have a driver's license or a military ID or whatever it may be, that's not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And they're a U.S. citizen. It's just BS.
Let me ask you one more question, right? Because I think I believe our time might be up here, but I'm old enough to remember 10 years ago, Mitch McConnell made a big fuss and prevented President Obama from getting his SCOTUS pick because he said it was an election year. Well, here we are, ladies and gentlemen, in an election year, mere months away from the midterms, and they want to not just prevent one nominee from going through the confirmation process, they want to overhaul a major undertaking. Overhaul. Think about how much has to happen in order to reconfigure things. How how do you square that circle? How do they make that hypocrisy stand?
Well, and we need to make the point that you're just making, which is that the clock is ticking. We're getting toward election day. This just goes to show how desperate they are, because they're willing to try to turn the whole system on its head in order to rig the election. I mean, that's just what it comes down to. They obviously did the redistricting in Texas. That, California responded, other states have responded, so that play is not working.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the other play. The other thing we haven't talked about, but does concern people across the political spectrum, is that they essentially want the federal government to get their hands on everybody's personal information here.
Why?
Because they're demanding that state board of elections turn over all this voter data to the federal government. And we saw what happened when Elon Musk and his, Doge boys got their hands on Social Security information. They've been misusing that. And, when Christy Noem was talking to the governor of Minnesota and the mayor of Minneapolis during that period of really intense ICE occupation of Minneapolis,
Mm-hmm.
they said, we might pull the ICE folks back if you give us your voting data.
Yeah.
Remember that?
What is that about? What are they trying to do with the voter information?
Right. So Donald Trump ultimately, and this is kind of scary, he wants a federal takeover of our elections. Fortunately, we have a federal system where each state counts the votes. I want everybody to think about this. Think about on election night if we had a centralized system, and Donald Trump's at the White House counting the votes, right? And he calls up his guys over in the Department of Justice or Homeland Security, goes, just like he tried in Georgia, hey, give me another 11,000 votes.
Yeah.
If it was all centralized in one place, like some countries have a central vote count, God help us when you have someone like Donald Trump in power, because they will lie and cheat and do everything they need to do to stay in power. And this is part of their plan. They want the federal government to collect a lot of the voter information, and we all need to be vigilant. I mean, we're gonna stop the SAVE Act, thanks to people finding out, what's in it, how bad it is. But Donald Trump's going to keep trying to do whatever he can to try to screw up the 2026 elections. And as I said, if he loses the House and the Senate, he's going to come back and say he really won. So, we need to have plan A is to stop the SAVE Act, and we will, but we need to remain vigilant.
One more quick question for you. What can regular folks, regular Joes like me and Joe, what can we do to help defend against this perversion of our democracy, this attempt to rig the election, attempt to steal our votes away from us? What can we do?
Well, first of all, thank you both for what you're doing, because letting people know what's up gives them the information they need to make sure that they don't get deceived and misled by what this bill is about. But ultimately, I do think people should say Donald Trump is trying to rig the election by making it harder for me to vote. It makes me really mad, and I'm going to work really hard to get out and vote, and also bring my neighbors with me. And I'm going to bring my neighborhood. And we're going to do what the people in Minneapolis did when ICE invaded their city. We're going to get out there, we're going to blow our whistles to protect our neighbors, and we're going to blow our whistles to protect our democracy. If we have a huge turnout, there's nothing that they can do despite all the tricks in the book. So we need people to get angry about the fact that Trump is trying to prevent them from exercising their right to vote, at least tens of millions of Americans, and grab their neighbors and go to the polls with them. And we need to do our part, just like people in Minneapolis have been doing their part.
Thank you so much, Senator. I really appreciate you joining us today.
Well, it's great to be with the two of you. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Brooklyn.
Joe!
My favorite quote: the Trump folks are trying to play us all for fools. You're absolutely right, Senator. And fools we are not. Fools we are not. Well, thank you for that, my friend Majid Padalin. I will see you Thursday on our Siren Live for No Kings and number 3.
Yes.
And great conversation. Very well moderated. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
See you Thursday. And with that, yeah. And I thought that was very interesting that he said that when they do not pass the SAVE Act, and when we prevail in November, that Trump will say, if we'd passed the SAVE Act, they wouldn't have been able to rig it. But who cares? I don't care. I'm done listening to him talk anyway. But I'm not done listening to the next two guests talk. Micah Irfan, the UVA law student and host of the Micah Irfan show on YouTube, and Oregon Senator Jeff Merkley. Hi.
Hey there.
It's great to see you. Hi, Senator.
Let me get in frame. How's it going?
Hi, good. I'm going to exit stage left, but it's great to see you both, and take it away.
Hey, Senator. It's great to be talking with you about the SAVE Act. I am a young person who's worked in voter registration for a long time, and I wanted you to first start by talking to me about the way that the SAVE Act is going to affect young people, because I feel like it's targeted at us specifically. Unfortunately, I cannot hear you, and I don't think the stream audience can hear you either. So maybe there's something you could do on your side to fix that.
Yeah, I think you might be muted potentially, Senator.
Ash Patel trying to crash the siren.
Oh, okay. Producer Sam is asking you to rejoin. So Micah and I are going to hold down the fort, if that's okay with you, Senator, because we want to get your input, and it was an excellent question. So if you wouldn't mind logging off and rejoining, and we can chat for a moment. Your generation, you said that, right? That was your first question. That is very important, because like my son is the tail end of your generation, and his experience with elected officials with voting is very different from mine. My son has a very jaded view. Donald Trump has been in power most of his young, aware life. So this is very important, Micah, and I'm so glad that you're asking these questions.
Yeah, I think they don't want young people to vote. Frankly, that's my theory. I don't think Republicans want young people to vote,
but not vote.
Yeah, because the polls show that young people don't like Republicans because we're more reasonable than the boomers. And I've worked in voter registration for young people on college campuses, and nobody's walking around with a birth certificate or a passport in
God,
their
no.
back pocket.
Right.
Even a lot of people don't have driver's licenses, especially real ID compliant driver's licenses, because a lot of them don't have cars because they're
Right.
struggling in the Trump economy.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's so many different situations that Republicans seem to brush over. They're like, oh, everybody has a driver's license. Everybody has a real ID compliant driver's license. Just the other day, I was voting in Virginia. I am legally a Virginia resident. I applied
Mm.
for a Virginia driver's license, but it takes forever for them to send you a Virginia driver's license. They give you a
Mhm.
piece of paper. So I
Yeah.
went to vote in Virginia, and they said, hey, you can't use your Texas real ID to vote in Virginia. You have to give us
Oh.
another ID. And if we had the SAVE Act, I would have not been able to vote in Virginia because I couldn't use my student ID.
Yeah. That's
Well, I'm hoping you all can hear me now.
Yes.
welcome back.
good.
Okay, I'm gonna exit again.
And I was hearing a little bit of what you were saying, Mike, about the difficulty. And it is all about, this act has nothing to do with preventing non-citizens from voting. It's all about preventing citizens from voting, citizens who Republicans don't want to vote. And it goes back to the commentary that Noam gave, saying that she wants the right voters to vote for the right people. And that right voters, it's not college students. They do not want college students to vote. They do not want young people coming in and registering the first time to vote. Why? Because they tend to vote a little bit more to the blue side. They don't want tribal members to vote, so it's aimed at tribal members. They certainly don't want women to vote, which is why one of the provisions would result in some 69 million American women having to re-register to vote because their last name is now different than their birth certificate was. So every time you hear that, oh, we have to stop non-citizens from voting, no, that's not the issue. It's to stop citizens from voting, and certainly a target is younger Americans.
Right. I mean, yeah, I like anecdotally from all my voter registration work with young people, I just don't think I could have registered anybody with these requirements. Hey, do you happen to have your passport on you? Or like,
I know if you
even
go
a
to a
driver's
college
license is
campus
hard.
and you try to do a registration drive, it's impossible to do it. People are like, oh, I can only register if I have a passport. Well, do I have it? Well, no, I wasn't planning to travel. And no, I've never traveled. I don't have one. And oh, I need my birth certificate and another ID. Well, that's back home, and that's maybe in a different state or a long ways away. Or as Murkowski was pointing out, in Alaska, it means traveling hundreds and hundreds of miles. Maybe you have to get a plane ticket to go get a piece of documentation. Then you're not sure it's going to work, and maybe the office isn't being open when you get there. And it's a big bureaucratic obstruction aimed at women and young people, certainly college students, certainly tribal members. And it's just wrong. This power in the hands of the president to be able to take the national voter database and proceed to dump people off of it and dump them off actually any time up to the election, which means let's imagine he does that for millions of Americans just maybe a week before the election or 2 weeks before the election. How are you going to get a passport in a 2-week
Right.
period? How are you even going to get a birth certificate in a 2-week period if you have to locate the county you were born in somewhere else across the country and get them to issue a document to you? No, this is all about locking in an authoritarian state. And when Trump said, hey, if you do this, we'll win the elections for the next half century, he was absolutely talking about how authoritarians proceed to create the trappings of democracy while destroying the actual function of a democratic republic.
Right. It's like Hungary, which is a regime that he's openly supporting, right? We have elections, but only the people who like us can vote. And we try to work to advantage kind of the groups that support us over the people that don't. A question I have is, I'm a law student. I'm a first-year law student, though, so I really don't know the answer to these things. Isn't this like unconstitutional in some sort of way? I mean, we ban poll taxes in this country. It's this explicit constitutional provision. You have to pay to get a lot of these IDs, especially if you don't have a birth certificate. You have to pay to get a new one. How does that not constitute a poll tax, which is plainly unconstitutional?
Well, you can imagine that the decision on whether something is constitutional rests with the Supreme Court. And this court has allowed all sorts of things that we think of as traditionally unconstitutional. And so on its face, we go, well, hey, this idea of purging people off the voter rolls right before the election, oh no, that's what dictators do. That's an absolute violation of a citizen's fundamental rights. But think about this. I mean, there are three big powers given to Congress, and one is the power of the purse to design and fund programs. Trump has violated that by shutting down programs that were fully funding and authorized, and basically said, challenge me in court. A second is the power of taxation, including tariffs. And he said, I don't care. No other president has ever done tariffs without authority from Congress. I'm just going to do it anyway. And he got away with it for a year before the Supreme Court said stop. And now he's trying to do it through other measures, a temporary measure right now, and then maybe another emergency power, and then it'll go back to the court. And a third is the power of war. And that too, he's stolen. Unlike George W. Bush, who came to get authority to go to a war in Iraq, he did not come to Congress to get authority to go to war in Iran. So this is a president who has stolen all three of the major powers the Constitution gives to Congress. He has no hesitation about rigging the next election. I mean, it's basically, I will do anything I can to secure power in this nation. And he's using what the author Ibram X says is the power of the great replacement theory. But essentially, it boils down to this: those people. I'm going to make people angry. I'm going to make them afraid by saying, hey, those people are coming to steal your culture. They're coming to steal your job. They're coming here to register to vote when they aren't legally allowed to vote, and you have to stop them. And they are also coming here to murder you and rape you. That is those people argument. It's used in Hungary. It's used in Russia. They use it against the Chechens in the south of Russia. It's used everywhere by these authoritarian presidents. And this is Donald Trump proceeding to say, hey, they're coming here to vote illegally. And of course, that is an absolute lie. There is no evidence of the kind. And I was really struck on the floor the other day when we had the senator from Utah was really pressing the SAVE Act, Mike Lee. And I said, well, there was an audit in Utah of 2 million voters. They found one person registered who shouldn't have been registered. And that person had never voted. So it was 0 votes cast out of 2 million. And Oregon did a similar audit over a 20-year period. And we had a less than 1 out of a million votes cast in that audit over that 20-year period. It was 0.6 out of a million. So less than one person out of a million could they find anything that suggested that wrong. So it's not about non-citizens, all about blocking citizens from voting.
Yeah, I mean, evidence has never gotten in the way of Republican ideology. We're about out of time, but I have just one more question for you that I'm personally curious about. You've seen all these polls saying 80% of Americans support voter ID. I mean, in Virginia, we have it. And, Democrats and Republicans alike support it. Is there any movement amongst Democrats to kind of call the Republicans bluff? Obviously, the SAVE Act is not just a normal voter ID bill. It's like the most stringent ID law, citizenship check law in the entire country. Is there any movement amongst Democrats just to put up like a pretty normal voter ID law that's like very, par for the course amongst the voter ID laws around the states, just to show that Republicans don't really stand for voter ID?
If I turn the clock back a couple of years, we had Senate Bill number 1, which established a whole series of reforms to enable people to vote instead of blocking them from voting, enable them to vote. We want everyone to have access to vote by mail, everyone to have an election day as a holiday, everyone to have some days of early voting. And we had an ID rules in it. But those ID rules were based on very reasonable things that people have. And realize, once you're registered and let's take vote by mail. You sign the back of the envelope and your signature has to match what is on the books for when you're registered. If not, your vote is set aside. and the whole envelope is set aside before it's ever opened. They call you up, and you have a couple days to come down and show that no, my signature changed over time or something of that nature. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, the point is the states have made so much investment in the integrity of the election. I agree with Trump by the way, on paper ballots, but after you have registered and after you have signed, then you really don't need any ID because your signature is your verification, as it is in so many other circumstances of life. But if you are going to have an ID, it should be a minimal requirement just to show, you're walking in the door and you have some form of government issued ID. But you can't even use that enhanced driver's license because many states, non-citizens who are here legally can get an enhanced driver's license. So even in the driver's license isn't proof that you are a citizen to vote.
Yeah, I mean, in Virginia, you can take a bill that has your address and name on it, and that's verification enough. I feel like that's reasonable. It's crazy that Republicans are pushing this notion. It's just voter ID. It's like, well, it's actually really not. Thank you so much for taking the time, Senator. I believe we're out of time, but I really appreciate you coming to speak with us today.
Thank you all. And thank you for this whole Stop the Save Act broadcast, because it really is our democratic republic, which is at enormous risk as Trump tries to rig the November election. And so it's all hands on deck all the time. Let's save our republic.
Thanks.
Thank you so much to you both. Thanks, Micah. Thanks, Senator. Senator Merkley said this is all about locking in an authoritative state, and that is absolutely the truth. If Republicans, if this were really about voter ID, Republicans would be making sure that everyone had voter ID, and that is definitely not what is happening. So let's keep this real. And that's one of the important parts of this conversation, is that we are breaking through the dis and misinformation, and we are giving you the facts and the truth so that you can be armed with both to know what is at stake and what you can do about it. With that, I'm going to bring in for now my dear friend Jess Piper. Jess, Executive Director of Blue Missouri and author of The View from Rural Missouri on Substack. I'm not sure about your guest, Congressman Joe Morelli, but he is having some audio issues. But for the moment, I have the distinct privilege and honor of being joined by my friend Jess Piper. Hi, Jess.
Hi, how are you?
Well, you know.
I know you ask normal folks and they're like, fine, but when we're amongst friends, oh my God, what is going on?
Right. 100%. And we have a side chat with a bunch of really cool people, and we keep it real in there, and we bounce all this shit off each other because it's real right now. And one of the things that we talked about earlier tonight is the disproportionate impact on rural voters.
Yes.
So let's talk about that while we wait to see if the congressman can join us.
Well, I was just thinking about it. And my DMV, so I live in a town of 480 people right on the Iowa line. The nearest DMV is a 25-minute drive, which I have a car, I can make that drive. But there are so many folks that can't make that drive. And I don't know if anybody's talked about how difficult it was to get the paperwork for a real ID, but for me.
Go ahead. Yeah, we can talk about that.
Here's the thing,
Yeah.
I needed a birth certificate, which I didn't have.
Right.
I needed both my marriage certificates because I've been married twice, right?
Elizabeth Taylor, but
Well, and the odd thing was my husband got a real ID too. Guess what he didn't have to get? Right? Right. And so
isn't that ironic? No offense, it's not your husband's fault, right? It's like, men, no, don't worry about it.
I know. And I saw a congressman from Missouri today say, well, you know what? You need an ID to fly, to drive, to buy alcohol. And I was like, okay, is this ID what I can use to register to vote if the SAVE Act goes through? And they're like, oh, no. Well, wait a minute. Your whole argument just fell apart then, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the real ID was hard enough to get, like you said, especially for women. This is hilarious, right? The standards, no men would vote if they had to do it. No offense, guys. Like one extra thing. It's like, well, I can't do that. But the bar for women is higher, and women, largely vote Democratic. But it is, again, on its face, if this was really about voter ID, then they'd be making sure that everybody in this country could easily get voter ID. But it's the opposite. They are making sure that people who live in rural areas where it is harder to get to places where they can get the ID. Senator Merkley, I think it was I forget who was talking about, Senator Mikowski, who was talking about a flight just to
Yes,
get
in
right.
Alaska.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you have to think about, like, I have a post office in my town, but they have very limited hours because there's only one person that's running the entire place. And so it may be open from, 9 to 12 every single day, and that's it. Well, that
Yeah.
sounds like time that most people are at work,
Yeah.
right? You would have to leave work. And in Missouri, we don't have paid time. Like, we just passed, paid sick time, and our lawmakers signed it away after the voters said. So, I mean, it's not like people can just pick up and leave anyway.
Yeah.
And so this is super problematic, especially for rural people, especially for communities of color, especially for, marginalized and oppressed communities. These are the things that are going to keep people away from the ballot box if it passes. And that's what it's meant to do, Joe. It's meant to
Mhm.
disenfranchise those people. Now, they assume that white rural voters are going to vote a certain way. So they're probably going to make it a little easier for someone in my community, but my community doesn't all vote that way, especially with what we're seeing right now. And not to change the topic, but did you just see that state rep flipped Mar-a-Lago's seat? A
No. What?
Democrat just flipped the seat in Trump's state district like 10
No.
minutes ago.
Wow.
Yes. Yes.
Wow,
It was
that's
probably those pesky mail-in ballots like Trump submitted.
my God. Boy, oh boy, would that be some Schadenfreude right there. But like, you know what though? This is the thing. Like, it is not a foregone conclusion, not in the year of our Lord 2026, that anybody's going to cast their ballot for Donald Trump or for any Republican, and they are certainly not going out of their way to earn those votes, which is why they're going to such great lengths to make sure that fewer people can vote, because they haven't even been trying. They're scared to show up in front of their constituents. And I would love to pick your brain, like you said, what folks around you are talking about, because you and I have talked about, and we've talked about this in our offline chat. You've talked about this publicly. What is happening to our farmers right now? What our farmers are going through between the tariffs and now this stupid war and lack of fertilizer and the price of everything. And those folks aren't a foregone conclusion to vote for Republicans right now.
No, I've had the same congressman for 24 years. And I told the story about seeing him at a football game, and the stands were packed, but it was packed full of soybean farmers. That's who's here, right? Our congressman could not find a friendly face. He couldn't find a place to sit down in that football stand because the farmers they know he's the one who's in charge. And I heard a rumor. He's not running. Joe, he is the longest serving congressman in the state of Missouri, and he's not running. You know
Wow.
why?
Wow.
Because they know what is about to happen, because he's chairman of the transportation committee, because he knows he's going to lose his chair, and he knows he's going to be in the minority, and he's going to have to back up a president who has a terrible war, who has, charges of pedophilia. And none of these people want to stand up and, do the things they're going to have to do when they're in the minority. So you see them passing all these bills to keep us from voting while not trying to do anything to get us to vote for them. Because
No.
they know
Right.
what's happening, right?
Right. And I'd be very curious to wonder if he's given any statements whatsoever on what's happening with the TSA right now, because even Donald Trump's own party, Foghorn Leghorn Kennedy and Ted Cruz, went to him with a deal to set to the side TSA, separated from ICE, etc. Fund TSA, get these agents paid, get those lines under control. And he said, no, we don't make deals with the Democrats. And so this lands squarely on his lap, whether or not he thinks that all those signs and all those friendly airports saying that it's the Democrats' fault. I don't think people believe that shit. I really don't.
They don't. And if you want to make people very mad, put them in a 4-hour line for TSA and then have ICE agents standing over them.
Amen.
I don't know if you've seen it, but they're trying to act like they're, goodwill ambassadors and handing out water bottles.
Yeah.
And you're like, I know
Right.
who you are. I know what you are. And nobody's going to fall for this crap. Those signs are outrageous though, right?
They really are. They really are. We were talking about this, like on the list of all the fire hose of fuckery shit that Republicans are up to, these stupid illegal Hatch Act violation signs in airports, attributing this shutdown and these lines to the Democrats are illegal on their face. But well, let's get to that after we get through the fact that we've sent 13 troops home in flag draped coffins in a war that we never approved and we still don't understand, and that you're now sending Marines to potentially, I don't even know, launch a ground war. I honestly don't know. But it is optically ridiculous. And again, like so much of this is dis and misinformation, right? That they think that because in the past historically they've been better at messaging on certain things. They just have, whether it's their shamelessness or that their base like communication style just cuts through the noise. But they are banking on that being the case here with the SAVE Act, which all of the representatives and senators we've had on. Oh, and the congressman's audio is working. So I'll ask this. That there's so much disinformation about hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well, sorry. Welcome, Congressman Joe Morelli. Thank you for working through all your audio issues. New York's 25th congressional district. We're just talking about the disinformation Republicans are putting out there about what the SAVE Act is. They're trying to call it the Save America Act. They're trying to say that this is Democrats not wanting voter ID and wanting illegal immigrants to vote in our elections. With that, I'm going to let you two take that conversation, and I'm going to exit stage left. Thank you, Jess, for that conversation, and thank you for taking the helm now.
Hi, Congressman. It's so good to be here with you. I'm so happy that your audio started working. So we were talking earlier.
I'm a technological imbecile. So I'm trying everything. But I'm glad to be with you. It's an important conversation. And as much as, we like to have fun with it, this is deadly serious for our democracy. And I caught the tail end of your conversation, but you're absolutely right. First of all, the whole photo ID thing is such a red herring. Yeah. Although my staff person told me young people may not know what a red herring is. But anyway, it's a huge distraction. I mean, we could, if we really needed to, we could agree on a photo ID bill nationally. I mean, some states like mine in New York, we use signature verification. They do it in Arizona. And look, election officials always take this stuff extremely seriously, as they should. And that's Democrats and Republicans at local levels. This is really, and by the way, I've been voting for a very long time. Somewhere right after the dinosaurs left, I started voting. And I've never once been in line at a polling place in New York where people have whispered, are you sure these people around here are the people they say they are? I'm not sure. They're suspicious. It's our neighborhood. We all know who we are, and the poll watchers know who we are, and we sign. And so there's no real confusion. There is no widespread fraud. That's a lie. There is no effort by the Democratic Party to have non-citizens vote. That's a lie. And by the way, consider this. If we were really that good as a party at fomenting this enormous fraudulent activity and never leave a single trace of evidence or one iota of data which suggests that it's going, we would be the most brilliant organization in the history of organizations. It's just all a fantasy because poor Donald Trump has the emotional maturity of my 4-year-old grandson Lincoln, and literally cannot come to terms with his electoral loss in 2020. That's what this is all about. He just can't get over it. And as a result, is going through creating all these mirages. He sold the MAGA world on it. It's nuts. So, the Save America Act, the photo ID thing is almost insignificant, but there are other really dangerous things, which I'm sure your guests have already spoken about. I don't want to, repeat what other folks have said, but it is very, very dangerous. And it upsets the American democracy in ways that people can't even begin to imagine.
It really does. And, I'm a rural person. I'm from a town of 480 people in Missouri. And a lot of folks that I talk to, when I bring this up, especially independents and Republicans, they'll say, well, it's no big deal for everyone to have a driver's license. And one, we do have to have an ID in Missouri. We have to present an ID.
Yeah.
But two, I think if you could speak to this for just a minute, folks in rural spaces, we all drive. I couldn't go to the grocery store. I couldn't get to the doctor or the post office or anywhere if I didn't drive a car and have a driver's license. Can you speak to the fact that there are a lot of Americans who don't have driver's licenses?
Well, even yes, that's absolutely true. And by the way, when it comes to proof of citizenship, driver's license, even real ID driver's license, in most states actually don't have a designation of whether you're a citizen. So your driver's
Right.
license would be helpful if you were registered, um, but it doesn't help you register. And so this is a big problem. So if you sort of think about it the way I think about it, putting aside the photo ID issue for a second, this starts first of all with the ability, first and fundamentally, and I think this gives insight into the way Donald Trump thinks about this. In the State of the Union address just a month or so ago, he said voting is a privilege. I take enormous issue with that. Voting is not a privilege in America. It is a right. Fundamentally, every person who's a U.S. citizen who has attained the age of 18 has a unalienable right to cast their vote. So it is not a privilege. And people shouldn't have to go through all kinds of hoops to demonstrate that they're eligible. If they're a citizen, they're eligible. And they can certainly attest to whether they're a citizen. And there are penalties when you falsely register when you're not an American citizen. And frankly, they can find almost no evidence that this happened. So, number one. So, to register, the first step in this process usually involves whether it's online or in mail or in person. You sign, fill out all your information. You attest to the fact that you're a U.S. citizen and you're a registered voter. That's how it works almost everywhere. This now would make it impossible for you to mail in your registration. It would make it impossible to register online. You would have to go to your Board of Elections and speak about Missouri. And as a diehard Cardinal fan, I don't claim to know anything about Missouri, but I do know about baseball in Missouri, which is
Yeah.
fabulous. But I also know in rural communities, the Board of Elections office may be 2, 3, 4 hours away driving. So let's assume for a moment that you're a college student who's now reached the age of 18 and you want to register to vote, or you're a married woman who has just moved and you and your husband want to register to vote. You have to get in your car if it's hours away. You have to go to the Board of Elections, no more online, no more mailing in, you have to go there. You have to bring your birth certificate. You'll have to bring a passport if you have one. Half of all Americans don't have a passport. You'll have to bring your driver's license. And if the driver's license name and your last name on your birth certificate are different, you have to bring a marriage license or you have to sign an affidavit claiming who you are. That's a lot. Imagine you get to the Board of Elections after a 3 hour drive and realize, oh, I forgot my birth certificate, or
Yeah.
oh, I forgot my marriage license, and
Mhm.
you get denied. You have to go all the way back. You've now spent 6 hours in a car. You've
Mhm.
got nerds for it, as we like to say. And you might just say, you know what, I wanted to participate, but I can't do this again. Many boards of elections aren't open after 5. They're not open on weekends.
Mhm.
This is the part of making it more difficult. Here's the final thing, which people really should not in any way minimize, which is all the data in the voter files of every state, all 50 states, has to be sent to the Department of Homeland Security.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know about you, but I do know about my neighbors. If I were to knock on doors on Deerfield Drive in Rochester, New York, and say, how would you feel about sending all your voter file information to the Department of Homeland Security right now? I think people would say, thank you, no thank you.
Mhm.
And here's the reason. For all the horrors of ICE agents and the killing of Alex Preddy, all the horrible things they have done, they're going to take that file that is sent from the state of New York, from the state of Missouri, they're going to compare it against their so-called database of citizens, which
Mhm.
is terribly inaccurate. And they're going to use it to purge names off that voter list. And they're not going to tell you why. So maybe the Rodriguez family gets thrown off. Maybe someone with a Muslim sounding name or Who knows why they will throw people off?
Mhm.
And you'll find out when you go to vote, even though you've been voting, Jess, for 10 straight years at your address, they're going to say, oh, I'm sorry. The Department of Homeland Security has indicated that they're not certain you're a citizen, so you're not going to be able to vote this year. And you say, I've voted for 10 straight years, and say, I'm sorry, do you have your proof of citizenship here? Maybe we'll let you vote provisionally. Did you bring your birth certificate? Did you bring your passport? And you're going to say, I had no idea, and I don't understand why I'm not a voter after having voted for 10 years. That will happen. It has already happened in states that have submitted their information. They're finding huge gaps in the accuracy of those things, but that's by design. They're going to want to purge voters. And you know who they're going to be purging? More women, more people of color, more young people, because they have to stack the deck finally. They'll have to stack the deck because they know they're so unpopular right now. Donald Trump has been a disaster in his last 14 months. Illegal tariffs, military actions that are unauthorized, gas prices, food prices, cost of living. The list goes on and on and on, and they know that. The members of Congress know it who have blindly followed him and turned themselves into pretzels trying to follow him from moment to moment. I was going to say day to day, but literally hour to hour.
Yeah.
So they have to rearrange the deck. They have to do whatever they can. So they're using the so-called Save Act as a means to really upset the election that's upcoming, the midterms. And you saw tonight's results in Florida are another indication that they are really in bad shape. I mean, I don't know what more data they would need. Even the Republicans, after a while, have to be aware that something is happening out in the homeland, so to speak.
And I see it. I mean, I probably talk to more rural voters than anyone I know, and I'm seeing it on the ground. I see it in Iowa, Nebraska, Missouri, Arkansas, Kansas. I see it all over the place. I want to ask you one more question before we have to go. I'm military mom. My son is a second lieutenant. Can you tell me how this SAVE Act would impact military members overseas and in other spaces?
Well, the first draft of the bill was complete disaster for military voters. We've continued to call them on it, so they're trying to make it better. But anybody overseas is really going to struggle. They tried to make some allowance for military members, but their spouses will still have challenges. And look, we should be working at making it easier for people to vote. I
Yes.
mean, that's American democracy. And you know what's really interesting? The hypocrisy of Donald Trump in the state legislative district where he voted today. He voted by mail. He voted by mail. He voted for the losing candidate, but he voted by mail. I mean, you can't ever underestimate his ability to be hypocritical and to do one thing and say another. What's good enough for him isn't good enough for anybody else. So, we're going to keep fighting. I'm blessed. I lead the House Democrats in the House Administration Committee, which has jurisdiction. Work closely with Senator Padilla, who's doing great work over in the Senate today. We're going to do whatever we can. American democracy depends on American participation in voting, and that's just bottom line. And we're not trying to tip the scales towards our side. We just want to keep it fair for everyone.
Exactly. I appreciate you coming and talking to us about this SAVE Act, and thank you for standing up for democracy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Jess. Thanks, Congressman.
Mhm.
Thanks, Jess. Are you up marching on Saturday?
I'm actually speaking down in St. Francis County, so I think I'm gonna have to leave really early so I can march with them.
Oh,
It's about 7 hours from home,
holy
so
moly. Well, nonetheless, that's just if not equally important, more important. So thank you so much, and thanks for participating tonight. It's always
thank you,
wonderful to see
friend.
you.
Good
We'll
to
see you
see
again
you.
soon.
Bye.
Hi. So many in quotes from this evening, and what the congressman just said that this is deadly serious for our democracy. Republicans want to pick their voters; they don't want their voters to pick them, and that's just not how democracy works. So they know they're in trouble in November, and they're going to go to any lengths that they can to mitigate those losses. But the power of the people is stronger than the people in power. And we are the antidote to anti democratic measures that they are trying to take because they don't plan on governing. They just want to rule. And sadly, for them. We've had about enough of this shit. So I'm Joe Carducci. I am so grateful to my co-founder of the Siren Network, Sam Schwartz, who has been running this show behind the scenes, to everybody who joined us tonight, everybody in the chat. And also just wanted to remind you that this Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern, we will be having another live event, this one in advance of No Kings 3. Bigger, badder, better than the rest. This is the third one. They've gotten bigger every time. This is a really important moment to send a message. We cut through a lot of the noise related to the SAVE Act tonight. Information is power. I'm so grateful for all of you for being here, and hopefully you'll tune in Thursday and then share where you're marching or how you're participating on Saturday during the No Kings marches. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for all the guests. And please go to thesirennetwork.com where you can find recording of this and lots of other content with incredible contributors. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.